And I might have been on mute there. I didn't have the mic turned on. Good evening, everybody. So we're obviously in a new office and playing with cameras, so we're going to try that again and get the introduction right. So good evening and welcome to the Canberra AWS User Group for August 2020. Before we get started, I'd just like to pay my respects to the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land we're presenting from, and pay my respects to elders past and present. So the land that we're presenting on, as you've seen from us playing around with the cameras while I was on mute, you'll see that it's not Brian's house. We're coming to you from the brand new Canberra AWS office. So you saw JJ there. We've seen the camera not being able to focus on me, so I'm looking really blurry for some reason. I'm hoping that figures itself out. There we go. And basically, we are really looking forward to being able to host events here in this office when it's safe for us to do so. For the time being, though, we're trying to get the tech right so that when we do go back to hosting events, we'll be able to have people in person who want that meetup events and connection with people in person, as well as maintaining our live broadcast. So if you're one of the people who catches us outside of Canberra and you're interested in continuing that, we're absolutely planning on continuing to keep the live broadcasts going through Twitch. So don't worry, we'll make sure everybody is included. So tonight, what we're going to be going through is our usual run through of what's new in AWS this month. We'll talk through some of the online training options that are still available to you, run through some of the new white papers that have been updated this month, and lastly, our main presentation, which is Cam and Rob from IP Australia, talking about how they built their new smart trademark system on AWS. So this month, we've seen 146 new feature updates released into AWS, which by the numbers is a quiet month for us. Still a lot of interesting stuff that I wanted to cover off as far as some of the highlights. So the first one I want to talk to is Code Guru. Now has support for its reviewer to do full repository reviews. So one of the things that we announced at reInvent last year was Code Guru, and it's split into two parts. One profiles your running applications. The second goes through and analyzes code in pull requests to pick up best practices and things you could optimize in your code. This was useful if you did a pull request for checking out the code that was different, but now we've got the ability to say scan an entire repository. So this is useful if you're onboarding a new code repository, an existing code repository, into Code Guru, so that you can start to pick up on some of those best practices and remediate them as you move forward. Next, AWS Fargate for EKS is now included in compute savings plans. So savings plans was another one that we announced late last year. And what it does is allows you to make a commitment to spend on compute in AWS without locking it into a specific service or platform. For example, I can use a savings plan to optimize my spend in EC2. I can optimize my spend in ECS. I can even do provisioned Lambda concurrency to optimize what I'm spending there. And as I evolve, I can move between any of those options. Now we've got an additional option being EKS. So if you've got EKS Kubernetes-based workloads running in Fargate, they will now be subject to savings plans and discounts that you can get out of that. So a great way to save money on what you're spending on your workloads in the cloud. Next, AWS Security Hub automated response and remediation solution is generally available. So Security Hub is a great service for aggregating findings from a number of different places and multiple accounts into a single pane of glass to make the job of your security people really easy to do. What this pre-can solution does is it gives you the ability to initiate some automated remediation of findings that come from Security Hub. So you can implement this and start to go through and help fix some of those findings in a really automated way. And that, again, it really improves your security posture because you don't need to wait for a human to remediate a security issue. Next, the EC2 Inf1 instances on the AWS Inferentia chips are now available in a host of new regions, including the Asia-Pacific Sydney region. So if you haven't heard of the Inferentia chips, these are essentially designed by AWS to offer the most cost-effective machine learning inference available in the cloud. So if you've got workloads that you've trained a machine learning model on and you're making the inference from that machine learning model available in your apps, running these workloads on the Inf1 instances that are specialized at doing that can help you reduce your cost by being able to get more performance out of the CPUs that are running that. So these are available now in the Sydney region and are absolutely worth looking at for anyone using machine learning workloads. Yep. Okay, next, a new service has gone generally available. Amazon Bracket, am I saying that correctly, John? Bracket? Yeah, I said bracket the first time and it just sounded really overly Australian bogan. Amazon Bracket, which is our quantum computing service. So again, this got announced in preview at reInvent last year. What Bracket enables you to do is to build out a quantum computing algorithm, and I am not even going to pretend to know anything about quantum computing because I absolutely don't. But what you can do is you can evaluate against a simulated quantum computer while you're getting the algorithm right. And then when you're ready, you can execute it against actual quantum compute, which is provided by partners built into the AWS ecosystem. So if you're looking at solving some really heavy computational problems where quantum computing is the thing, you can do so in a pay-as-you-go fashion in the cloud without having to look at going and buying your own quantum computer. So this is a really great way to start bringing that in where it makes sense for the workloads that you need it on. Next up in our elastic load balancers, the application load balancer and classic load balancer now have added defense in depth with the introduction of the HTTP desync mitigation mode. So this, for anyone who's playing along at home, is related to if you've got a series of proxies between your user in the browser and AWS. Proxies all have their own individual ways of interpreting HTTP standards, and occasionally one proxy can differ to what the next proxy thinks, which can differ to what the actual load balancer thinks, which creates some interesting opportunities for an attacker to be able to inject specific types of attacks to do with how those requests are handled. So what we get now out of this new update, which is available as something you can enable on your load balancers, is there's a library that AWS have published around detecting these types of attacks. And so you can opt into a strict mode, a moderate mode, or just a monitored-based mode to detect these kinds of attacks. All the logs will hit CloudWatch, and you can improve your security posture and protect from those types of attacks while still using that managed, automatically scaling and highly available load balancing service that you've always gotten out of the Elastic Load Balancer. A few more to wrap up with here. AWS Cloud9 has released enhanced VPC support. So Cloud9 is our web-based IDE. So if you're a developer and you want to work in a web browser-based IDE as you cut your code, Cloud9 is a really great service to have a look at. One of the things that Cloud9 has previously required is essentially a route to the internet or via some sort of gateway to be able to connect that EC2 instance to where your users were running. Now what we've built in is the ability to leverage the session manager component of Systems Manager, which means that I can have a completely isolated VPC and a managed SSH experience through Systems Manager to connect to my Cloud9 IDE. So this means I can be in a highly secure network, helping make sure that all of my code assets and where I'm executing my builds is a completely isolated network, while still keeping it available to my developers to connect to. Next, there's a preview that's been released of the AWS controllers for Kubernetes. So this essentially allows you to provision a number of AWS resources from within your Kubernetes clusters. So if you really like working in Kubernetes and your workflows suit Kubernetes and trying to bolt on CloudFormation or other scripts to provision things like SNS queues or S3 buckets is sort of breaking that workflow for you a bit, you've now got the ability to look at using these controllers to do that provisioning for you and maintaining those existing tooling and workflows that you have around how you execute on those. The AWS API Gateway HTTP APIs have added a number of integrations, so 5 additional integrations to AWS services. So the HTTP APIs, when they first released, were pitched as an option for if you just got a Lambda function behind an API gateway and you don't need any of the additional sort of heavy-handed features that are in the main REST APIs, so things like custom authorizers or complex path mappings and things like that, the HTTP APIs run faster and are cheaper. And so now if you want to use those for more than just Lambda, there's an additional 5 services that you can directly call from those HTTP APIs. So again, giving you some options to look at how you can improve your performance in an API gateway and reduce your costs. And my last update for the night is the EC2 M6G, C6G, and R6G instances are available in a bunch of new regions, including Sydney. So these instances, the 6 series, are based on the Graviton 2 processors. So again, this is custom silicon that's been designed for AWS, and essentially it allows you to get better cost performance of your workloads running in the cloud. So these new generation instances are based on ARM and are absolutely worth a look in terms of trying to get better bang for your buck in the workloads that you're running in AWS. Alrighty, so again, the training updates. There are some classroom courses that I've seen starting to turn up in here, but largely it is still remote. And so I encourage you to continue looking at that as an option for any training that you're looking at. So as always, aws.training is the website to go to. Search for the courses you're looking for, and you can find either the online options or some of the in-person options. But the online options are a really great way to get educated and get certified so that you can go and learn a whole bunch of new things about different parts of AWS. And lastly, so white papers. This month, a small update for white papers as well. Last month we had more than JJ could fit on the slide. This month, this is a list. So there were a bunch of new ones in there. So the Cloud Enablement Engine, for example. There was an update to the Data Residency AWS Policy Perspectives document as well. So that's always an interesting one to have a look at from a policy and governance and security standpoint as well. So as always, aws.amazon.com/whitepapers is the place to go to find where these are all at and be able to have a read through some interesting content. Alrighty, so before we get into the main presentation, my usual talking points here of what exactly do you want to hear? So we pay attention to the feedback, we watch the chat that goes on in Twitch, and if you reach out to us through Meetup, we're always super keen to hear what people think. If there's a particular topic you're interested in, if there's something you'd like to present on, please reach out to us. We're always super keen to support what the community's after, because at the end of the day, if you people don't find this interesting, then what's the point? And submit your feedback every month. Again, we say this all the time, and we see the feedback numbers nowhere near the number of people in the room. We've got the stats to prove it. So when Meetup gives you that little notification or that email saying, tell us on 1 to 5 stars what you thought, if you could take a couple of seconds, let us know. We really do appreciate it, and it helps us make sure we keep bringing you the kind of content that you're interested in. And lastly, friends don't let friends miss the AWS Canberra user group, especially when it's online and it's really, really easy to watch. So I say it all the time, word of mouth is our best thing to help get people aware of the group. So if you like what you see tonight, tell a friend, get them to have a watch the recordings after the fact. If you can't do it live, that's fine too. We're just super keen to be able to grow that community, and word of mouth helps us drive that. So, without further ado, at this point, I'm going to hand over to Cam and Rob from IP Australia and let them start talking about how IP Australia built the new smart trademark system. Cam and Rob, it's over to you.
Awesome. Hey guys. We're just sorry, we're working on the delay on our Twitch. And Brian fully warned us not to look at our Twitch streams, and we did it anyway. We couldn't resist. But firstly, thank you to the AWS Canberra user group for having us. It's great for us to be able to broadcast some of the work we're doing here. We're always really happy to present some of our work, I guess, that we're doing and broadcast it to the world, at least in our little Canberra ecosystem. I'm going to throw over to a presentation, but as Brian alluded to, we're presenting on Smart Trademark, which is an initiative here in IP Australia. Hopefully the slides come up, and it's just a very splashy part of it. But basically, Smart Trademark is a piece of evolving work that we're sort of using in a sense to co-design and pilot with customers a piece of investigation where we're looking at ways to focus on counterfeit and trademark misuse within our ecosystem, see whether or not we can find real benefit in enabling trademarks to operate, I guess, in new ways. I've got a tiny bit of housekeeping to do first, which is just an overview of IP Australia. So IP Australia is the government body that's responsible for administering and registering IP rights. Examples of those obviously are patents, trademarks, designs, and plain readers' rights. We'll be talking a bit about patents, but our core focus is trademarks, being that we're doing trademark modernisation. So for us, the uplift of trademarks, just to give context around trademarks as well, I guess, it is the identity, the brand related to your trade effectively. So
a good example is for any of the general public who aren't privy to copyrights and trademarks or patents, is simply the trademark is the brand itself. So if it's Coca-Cola, for example, the trademark might be either the image of the Coca-Cola swirly words or just the words Coca-Cola itself. So you can trademark obviously a number of things, and obviously it's not super interesting for everyone, but it is really important to understand the context of how our work fits in with brands and the marketplace. Cool, power's going out. Sorry, we have awesome power saving lights, so bear with us for a sec. So trademarks are obviously your brand, and patents are things or inventions is an easy way to think about it. Designs are things like clothing, the way things look, and PBR is a special agriculture kind of section that we also deal with, which is around breeds and essentially copywriting and breeds. We won't bore you too much on our administrative government work, but we will dive straight into STM and some of the benefits.
Yeah, so we do have a tiny bit more dry government stuff, which is why we're doing this. And the core of our work, right, is we've got to fit into a strategic alignment around agency provisions in terms of registration and administration of copyrights, but we can play a little bit on the fringes. So part of our corporate plan that fits into sort of horizon planning that we're going through, we're currently in our first horizon that ends in 2022. Some objectives around that is sort of the utilisation of technology to help enhance the customer experience, particularly around connectedness for us as a project, and looking at mechanisms for IP right enforcement, the ecosystem as well. So the way that we see our project doing that is by creating better visibility of authentic goods and services as they can connect with a more versatile and interoperable trademark, as it were. So we sort of talk about it in light of the traditional IP right was very much you come, you file, you registered or deemed original or authentic, and you get a piece of paper that you hang on your wall. So that system worked really good 100 years ago. But these days, we've got to think about ways that customers are using those IP rights within the digital ecosystem. So it's a big piece around modernisation. For us, that ties into these benefits. The main one is sort of securing the value of the trademark to ensure that it's harder to knock off, easier to prove what is authentic and what is using your trademark authentically. And we do that by raising awareness of what is and what isn't authentic through that authority mechanism in a way that we need to modernise and uplift our platform. That really covers off kind of the government stuff, but we just also need to talk a bit about the issue. A lot of people, particularly in our ecosystem, are aware of the impacts of counterfeiting for brands, and as the brand relates directly to that trademark, it's quite a significant issue for us in terms of deeming the value of the IP right moving forward into the future. There's a bunch of different metrics. These are the big scary ones that we like to use. So we've got 3.3% of world trade, roughly $3 trillion estimated by 2022. I really like this second metric, which is a study that the US Government Accountability Office did where they bought 47 pairs of the same brand and type of shoe from reputable online sellers, and 20 of those pairs came back as counterfeit. That was done in 2018. And for us, obviously more close to home, the cost of taking fringes to court be anywhere between 150 and 250, which is a significant overhead when you're talking about seeking damages and going through litigation after the damage is done as well. So you've already lost those sales, and then you've got to put another outlay in. So what are we sort of doing about it? So we're doing smart trademark, and we've sort of come about this through a journey of exercises where we started way back in 2017, and we started by sort of looking into blockchain technology as a whole, as an enterprise, as a government agency. I am what was the blockchain lead at this point, and running sort of a raft of different activities, which was going to help us sort of disseminate information around the value and application of blockchain within the IP rights ecosystem at an enterprise for us. We were fortunate enough to work with some really good providers, understand the journey, and doing some great enterprise level research to build out the pool. And I do want to touch on that before we get into the meat of the, I guess, what I call the strategic inflection point, where we made the decision to start developing the smart trade market as it exists now. And that's where we get into the meat, technically what it is and what it's doing, and how it works. But it's also important for us to reflect on the blockchain discovery journey, because it's really shaped our decision in the architecture of our platform, particularly in our choice of the tool ledger database, which we'll touch on. So starting with our sort of blockchain discovery journey, we've had three key areas that we were looking at, which was patents use cases, trademark use cases, and our general enterprise research. Working with a Queensland-based startup, Civic Ledger, we did a decentralized marketplace concept where we used, I guess, block to help with the exchange of contracts for patents licensing. So patents licensing is quite a large piece of, I guess, the ecosystem, in that there's a lot of exchange between larger entities as they need to kind of trade off on licensing. It's also a key way for researchers and innovation to kind of co-share on things and help stimulate a lot of innovation within the marketplace. So sorters is particularly high value. We'll talk about what that technology is in the next slide. But the second use case, which we worked with a Canberra-based digital specialist, Agile Digital, in developing a source of origin application. And this was our smart trademark alpha. Very fortunate to see some success, winning a few awards with this one, where it dealt with leveraging the trademark as a notarization of supply events to create a high level of trust in the supply chain. And we've sort of, in our beta, turbocharged this and expanded it into something that we see that's more interoperable with more ecosystems. And I talk on sort of how we came to that conclusion in key business artifacts that we found through that. Lastly, we did some enterprise research, building reference architecture, and looking at, I guess, how we could energize collaboration in the international sphere, as it's a benefit through the nature of blockchain when you're trying to be distributed. And that work has, for us, pivoted into a community that we have with other IP officers, where we're investigating the standardization of blockchain to align our ecosystem, as the other two use cases also sort of spans that sphere. So jumping back into those patents and trademarks use cases of it, and looking at what we actually did and how that has formed our decision in, I guess, our technical understanding of where we wanted to go with the next stages of our blockchain journey, but also of our smart trademark journey. With the patents use case, we created patents tokens on the Ethereum virtual machine, where we created about, I think, 50,000, all the patents associated to the year 2017. We tokenized those built out a raft of solidarity contracts to enable the exchange of the creation and handing over of patent assets or patent license assets within an ecosystem where we developed a marketplace mock-up that was centered around green energy. So we're able to prove sort of the ability to quickly hand over, to create the license as an asset against a patent token asset and see that exchange go through. Things like payment gateways where often, I guess, a patent license is done generically across two tables within a lawyer firm over a number of weeks, dealing out terms. That sort of efficiencies we're looking at. Our trademarks use case, we use a raft of trademark APIs to interface with a external blockchain notary service. And that was served up through mobile applications where we're able to have two different applications. One was for the people within the supply chain who had control of passing off the goods and to be able to scan those events as they go through. The last one was a chat program that was to serve up all that information, the experience to the customers. All of that's invaluable in terms of how we got to understand the technology and these key findings in the middle. So for us, there was some serious pros in terms of traceability and auditability. IP rights in their very nature are kind of an ongoing audit chain of even as they come in and an application and going through formalities and classification and examination, decision-making and office decision-making all the way up to the registration is kind of natively what we do as an agency, is creating a ledger-style ecosystem already. So having a immutable and completely trusted, traceable ledger for us was seen as incredibly high benefit. A lot of these cons, was going to say that they were, I guess, identified in 2018, 2017, depending on which use cases we were trialing. And some of these things actually kind of work themselves out a little bit. But for us at the time, the service maturity of a lot of blockchains was relatively unknown. We did have issues around the write speed for various services. The notary service that we used in our trademark application did actually stop working shortly after we finished our trial. It became defunct. And obviously there's some issues around scaling storage.
Yeah, and for full context as well, obviously as part of these alpha and beta pilots, we are running extremely lean. These are by no means large-scale projects. It is really just 2 or 3 of us here at IPA and a bunch of talented devs who kind of help us out with this stuff. So again, a lot of people might be thinking, well, all of those things can be solved, and it is probably true. What we are trying to do is run extremely light on cash and time, and just to prove out these concepts is a reimagining of the way trademarks and IP rights work in the environment around the web. If it's sales platforms, for example, eBay, all those sorts of places where people are using IP rights now that they weren't 100 years ago when we used to give them a piece of paper that said, hey, here's your IP right.
Yeah. Some other considerations that we saw, and I'll touch on some of these in the next slide as well, which is our sort of discovery lessons. The value of traceable right, as we saw in our trademark use case, was very beneficial. But also the way that we consider our data, whether or not it should exist in a distributed nature, or if we keep it sort of sovereign or siloed to the agency as a trusted pillar. So with those technical discoveries, we had our general lessons that we learned from doing the pilot, which is working directly with customers to sort of shape what we saw with benefit and issues together to kind of understand where we could take this as the next step. We definitely saw that the proof of authenticity via connection to a trademark is viewed as very high, and that's because it's government-backed. And so we wanted to keep those themes going. However, when we developed a provenance app that was sort of unique to the two export streams that we trialed in, we realised that the complexity and the diversity, even within those two streams, meant that it was going to be increasingly hard for us to try and take a giant piece out of applying that across all the different goods and service classes that a trademark would cover, and how unique each individual customer has in terms of their supply chain and the events they sort of go through. So we're dealing in very complex ecosystems. Having said that, a lot of the participants were highly engaged in digital transformation. So a lot of people within supply chains are actually looking for services, be them whether they think they're silver bullets or just of benefit. They are looking to try and get to a point where they want to, I guess, find more benefit out of the digital ecosystem. So we boiled all this down and we said, well, what does it look like in function? And we want it to be something that is a little bit more agnostic of any unique supply chain, but still keep those threads like the government backed and providing more authority over the trademark and turn it into a platform, which is sort of where we landed with Smart Trademark as the kind of the enabler for those existing and future ecosystems, so that people can get that integration with our trademark. This is the fun part, I hope, where we start actually talking about the platform as it exists today and what it kind of is all constructed of. So that's what I can just talk a bit about this.
So thanks, Rob, for the context. And I think it might be a little boring and dry, but the context is important to understand, I guess, where we're coming from, what we're trying to solve. And for a little more background on, I guess you guys are sitting there going, what's this got to do with AWS? This is the AWS User Group. I'm in Australia, and my main hat that I wear is manager for a digital transformation project, which is a major uplift of IP Australia's transactional systems onto an API-driven modern platform, essentially. So we are a cloud-first agency. We are heavily AWS users. For example, we use things for everything from CloudFront, EKS, Elastic Databases, S3 buckets, and that's kind of where by building this new, flexible, easy to use, and easy to change API architecture at Australia, it kind of led us down this path and some synergies with work that Rob was doing to build out this Smart Trademark platform. We are very prominent in the digital transformation space. We are a pretty small agency, but we have quite a bit of, I guess, IT power, and we do a lot of cool stuff here at IPA. You might have heard of us before, but that's not unknown. So yeah, essentially we've moved to API infrastructure, which allows us to do things like expose all of our data sources via our API to anyone, add in new functionality all the time, and plug in a number of services which we haven't had the possibility to do before. And Smart Trademark is one of those things which has been enabled through that cloud-first mentality and that move to, I guess, modern IT. So I'll speak to the trademark, Smart Trademark as a platform a little bit, and it might be a little bit confusing, but we'll get more context into what that feeds into and what that looks like in real life in a second. So Smart Trademark is essentially, at its most basic form, it's just us serving up as the authority over trademark information, and customers tying anything, if it's a domain name, a geolocation, a barcode, anything that they can give us to that trademark. And so we as the authority over trademarks and them as the owner can validate that information. And you'll see there's a little piece there called the trust badge. We'll dive into a demo in a moment and kind of see what it means in the real world. We've recently done a news piece on Not News, for example, about a trust badge and NRL, which we'll dive into in a second. So yeah, again, the trust, it's actually an extremely simple use case and extremely simple implementation. It's just a bunch of APIs speaking to Quantum Ledger Database. I'll just jump on to the next slide to give a little more context, and I hope it comes through quickly for you guys. So again, it's just a very simple implementation of a number of APIs, writing to, reading from the AWS Quantum Ledger Database service, which is been an awesome form for us, and something I'll dive into in the next slide as well, over a traditional blockchain implementation. It has a bunch of benefits around flexibility, reliability, all that sort of stuff, but I'll go into that in a second. But yeah, again, all that's happening is the customer of ours is providing us with a key or a identifier, and we are tying that to AWS QLDB to the trademark information and hashing that together. Once that's complete, it obviously allows us to serve that backup that information anywhere where it's displayed. The trust badge and auditable demo is an example of where it's happening against a domain name, for example. So the owner of that IP right has simply stated to us, this is my domain name. We serve back some JavaScript. They chuck it in their website, and through the API calls on page load, we validate that domain name is correct with the domain name they've registered with us, and then we allow the trust badge to show. So it gives the consumer, I guess, a little bit more, a level of confidence in the domain and helping with that counterfeit kind of issue we're seeing and lots of people are seeing in the marketplace. But beneath the trust badge is what we talk about, the platform, and that is really, like I said, it's just a bunch of APIs. So the way we see it, the big feature sell for us is really that we want to plug this in with big players in the marketplace to really raise that confidence bar that people have over any of their products, their brands, and their IP rights, as that's our main remit. So for things like, for example, like I mentioned, online marketplaces, we're really keen to integrate with them to see if a trust badge would give confidence to consumers that they're not buying a counterfeit product, or at least if they are buying a counterfeit product, that they're knowingly doing so. So I think a lot of people will say, well, lots of people want to buy counterfeit stuff anyway. And again, we're not the silver bullet. We don't think we're solving the world's biggest problem. What we do think we are doing is raising that bar a little in consumer confidence and kind of curbing that mentality of easily ripping stuff off. And that's where the government trust is into it. So I think that relying on the government trust is a massive key for us. So sorry, I'm just reading the Twitch slide. So M2M is, machine to machine. So that's what I was kind of referring to there. We think the platform itself lends itself to plug into other services in this kind of environment at the moment. For anyone across any of the traceability stuff, there's a whole bunch of blockchain information, blockchain movements, and traceability, supply chain activity happening in the market. So there's whole heaps of products, lots of companies doing a lot of great stuff. Our idea was that we wanted to stay really agnostic to technology and the solutions which people were building. So we hope to plug into, for example, another government agency service or another machine-to-machine kind of service where we can work together in a counterfeiting environment to improve that problem. So I'll dive into a bit again why we've chosen QLDB and why AWS kind of solves a big problem for us. So Rob spoke to the fact that in our alpha and our inner learnings, we had a lot of issues trying to use blockchain, but at the same time, not run nodes, not have a huge architecture, not have all of that stuff due to money, time, and all those sorts of things. So we used a number of free notary services. Again, the one we chose happened to fall over about before we thought we were going to kind of crack into it. So again, we had a lot of guidance here, and we reached out to AWS because we'd seen QLDB in the overseas markets, but being a government agency, we really need stuff in Sydney region, and they were kind enough to kind of get that through a little quicker, and we leveraged the AWS QLDB service to give us the benefits of blockchain-like technology without, I guess, some of the drawbacks. Again, so yeah, it's obviously AWS stuff, so it's super secure, it's super scalable, it's very cheap, and it's really easy for us to expand on, build on, and our workforce and our main remit, we have lots of AWS skills here. So again, it's really easy for us, and so we've really enjoyed doing it. Again, a lot of people have reached out and said this is a great use of QLDB. and solved a lot of our, I guess, hardcore blockchain problems, but still gave us pretty much all the benefits of that immutability record and ease of implementation as well.
Yeah, and I guess just on the scalability, here we've got the horizontals, but that's the advantage of going on to something like AWS is that this directly pivots to our horizontals where we can start to see potential use cases for other IP rights in line with the work we've done. But it's going to be super simple for us to effectively clone what we've done, or even leverage the same sort of AWS QLDB in the way that we build these audit chains that exist on the IP right level for owners that possibly own their IP rights. And we can look at systems where we get a really clear picture around how the IP rights are actually getting transferred between, or a product that is associated to an IP right actually transfers between various IP rights, or which IP rights are getting used in similar sort of chains. So it's going to start building a lot more clarity around how things operate in the ecosystem too. But I think we're going to do a bit of a demo. So we do want to show you the Trust Badge, which is the functional application that I guess is low-hanging fruit for the Smart Trademark platform, because we saw an easy way to build, I guess, an application on top of the Smart Trademark platform that was going to do that same sort of, you provide the government a identifier and we insert a validator, and that identifier is a domain address URL, and that identifier is this piece of JavaScript that generates a badge that goes on the website. So just going to share another screen.
So yeah, I guess there's always the risk with live demos that they don't go well, but we hopefully it should work if Rob can share the screen. Make sure you guys can all see it properly as well.
So we should be seeing hopefully by now.
Yeah, you should be able to see the NRL shop website. So
NRL have been a strategic partnership for us. Just before we jump into the demo, a bit of background as to how we are working with the NRL. So being a national brand obviously helps with, I guess, how we disseminate information about our project, which is a key bit about our awareness and how we drive awareness on the platform. But also, as we can see just on this very first page, their use of IP rights and the hierarchy of IP rights in the organisation is actually quite a complex stream with various use cases. As anybody who's a footy fan would be aware, these IP rights exist in advertisement, on merchandise, within wagerers, all through various supply chains. So for us, it was sort of a no-brainer to work with somebody who could, I guess, lend us a bit of an ecosystem that was really going to test us to prove out this use case. But to look at the actual badge itself, effectively through the application of providing us with the URL of nrlshop.com, they've come through, they've put it through the system. In this case, we pushed it through because we haven't exposed our, I guess, UI on top of this. And we've served up the JavaScript after it's done sort of the creation levels, the create through the APIs into Quantum Ledger Database. Quantum Ledger Database creates a hash, and we use that hash as an identifier within that string of JavaScript that produces this little badge that goes on the website.
So yeah, in terms of implementation, it's probably not that impressive for you guys, but it is a simple application of a bunch of APIs and Quantum Ledger Database, which really gives us, I guess, a cool representation of a visual representation of how the Smart Trademark platform works. And we'll probably click on it in a second. But even by displaying that badge on the website means that it has hit our service and validated that URL is associated to that IP right, and hence it can be displayed. I think you see on the Twitch feed now, it's popped up just a little, I guess, experience there that has a verified for use on that domain, which is NRL Shop. So, yeah, in essence, it's extremely complex implementation by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a cool visualization, something that we need to leverage more and go across a lot of platforms in the future. I think another cool example of this is probably going to be in physical products, and people are often asking, well, yeah, that's online, but what about when you actually buy a physical thing? So with our service, the way the Smart Trade platform is written, like I said, you can't give us any identifier at all. So anything to be used as an ID, we'll hash that in QLDB and serve it back via an API. So we've done things like spun it up into a QR code, for example, barcodes we're looking at, things like that, to be able for a person to buy a product, and if it's scanning their phone or hitting a URL or redirect through a QR code or something like that, they can verify that IP right or that thing has come to a database, so IP Australia, and is verified for use on that product. Again, it's no silver bullet. There's plenty of holes in that, and people point out all the time, anything can be faked. There are a few things that are really hard to fake, for example, and one of those is a .gov.au domain. So again, this is where the government trust, what I was referring to before, it comes into it. We feel that whilst we've seen extremely complex counterfeiting models and extreme lengths counterfeiters go to, including creating new experiences which look like the real scan experience, for example. When you're messing with the government, it is a little bit different as opposed to just ripping off a brand. There's another website, which the reason we're working with the NRL is they have another website to be called NRL Shop or Shop NRL, the other way around. And it was a direct rip of the official NRL Shop down to colours and everything, and it sells counterfeit goods. So that's kind of the part of the reason we're working with them, is to have a trust badge on this website. It just raises that confidence a little bit from the consumer that, hey, it's got a government logo on it, it's a little interactive tool that I can look at, that we've verified those IP rights against that domain.
Yeah, I guess to touch on as well, that this is very heavy. Yeah, that's why it's very vanilla. Also, some people really like government to look vanilla. It looks more official. But as Cam touched on, really, this is the very first cut of what might become a new capability for us. But before investing lots of money to all those additional security measures that could go into this, we just wanted to prove that it worked. We did that with consumer testing. I do have other slide decks, but I didn't actually put it into this one. But we did go through after consumer testing, and we did see a statistically significant increase in how consumers gain trust over the two websites that we had implemented this in when it was delivered. And interestingly as well, people were very good at articulating what it was trying to do. So for us, that's sort of cadence for us to move to our next phase, which is to look at the viability of this and how to make it stronger at the platform level, but also how the trust badge works. So I'm just going to quickly jump back in. We don't have too much more to cover off, and we don't have too much more time, I don't think, either. So this will be my like the playoff song at the Oscars now. So hopefully I'm back on our site. I just want to talk a little bit about another pilot that we're doing, which is around security provenance of bush foods or native bush foods to Australia. And that's in collaboration with a few other government agencies, the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation, who work very closely with the Northern Aboriginal Kakadu Plum Alliance, the NAAKPA, as well as the Australian Nuclear and Science Technology Organisation. And this is all about trying to help prove and consolidate the, I guess, proof and evidence that you can build within a supply chain to prove that the Kakadu plum is authentic. The way that we sort of see it is that Smart Trademark can really help with the association back to the alliance themselves and the brands that are interoperable with those that synonymous brand that's going to be sort of the gold standard for Kakadu Plum, while Anstar does kind of cryptographic testing. A good example of this is around the actual issues. So we've got two key issues, which is ingredient fraud, where aggregators and processors are sort of adulterating the products that they get with cuts of unadulterated ingredients and claim that it's 100% unadulterated. And labeling fraud, where obviously people are listing as having the ingredient when in fact they don't. So what we're trying to do is build out a platform that's going to look at helping through a method of using isotopic and elemental testing. I don't know that much about it. That's why the science guys at Anstar are going to do a lot of that. They're going to look at ways of isolating clear elemental signatures within the fruit as it turns from a raw fruit into a pulp or a powder, and then as it gets integrated into products. And those products are mainly related to food or sort of pharmaceutical or nutraceutical goods, where IP Australia's smart trademarking court will try and help with the labelling fraud around the chain of custody. So this is a very, very busy diagram, and I don't want people to feel like they need to understand all of it, but the idea here is that through this sort of supply chain, there will be, I guess, one part of an application experience that can be served up. Anybody who's within the supply chain will have to go through and do a layer of testing and come back and sort of have their testing come out and be related and shown evidence that has actual real Kakadu within it. That turns into the isotopic fingerprint and can be served up by an application. On the other side of it will be the smart trademark that's associating the brands that are in the supply chain to the head brand, which would be that gold standard Kakadu Plum, and then wrapping it all up into this mobile experience that can then be delivered into, say, an IoT device that gets listed on the product. It could be a barcode or something else, but it's really about just securing that brand and giving it a level of traceability and auditability. So we're going to use the trademark as the provenance engine that kind of stitches all this information together to sort of help provide a bit more insight. Also, like to serve up the key information around the Aboriginal enterprise, the traditional owners, their story, which is super important in this traceability, where easily get lost from the manufacturer of a good onto the product, where that Kakadu came from, and the significance back to the Indigenous enterprise, and also that, I guess, shared value model where the manufacturer shares some of that back to the Indigenous enterprise.
Yes, I think that's like the diagram's, like I said, more busy than anything, but it does display that kind of that vision we have for using like smart trademark as an engine and a way to plug into other services to create those audit histories against any IP. So again, just an example of like, if people can think of it and plug into it, that's great. Like we've had a lot of people come and talk to us about applications across all sorts of things, and that's where we really see this going. There's nothing more than a simple way to record things against a government ledger at the end of the day. And it could be against any government ledger. So we're also like looking in that G space, which you might have seen on the other slide, seeing how this fits with things like trade modernisation and things like that. But I'm just notable at the time. So I don't want to waffle on too much more.
This is basically it, guys. So really what we've talked about where we came from in our journey around IP infringement and blockchain discovery that has led to both qualitative business decisions as well as technical decisions to get to our data, and things that we're talking about with the Indigenous IP protection and cross-government collaboration, as well as the industry involvement, where we're in our staged beta. It's super important for us in shaping that product, as Cam has just said. So, and that pivots on the values of our product as we try and, as an agency, look at being kind of more like the dexterous type of project program of work. We're not like sitting in a traditional hierarchy where we can say, not looking for a silver bullet solution. We don't have a big business case that's going to solve counterfeiting. What we need to do is dip our toe in and understand the actual sentiments behind the customers, so not having statistical drivers, developing in almost like a product type delivery mindset where we have MVPs, and we just be super flexible with our collaborators as well as with ourselves and the team, to find investment, findings driving our investment as we move forward. So what we're hoping is that right now the platform is kind of live as a sense, but we're very isolated in what is live. But we are looking for people, and we're talking to people regularly about what they would see as benefit for people who are in the ecosystem where they could leverage an IP right, those app developers, Amazon Marketplace. If you know anybody there, Brian, I'm looking at you. We'd love to talk to these people because really it benefits everybody. It benefits the brand owners, but it's also benefiting these companies that are operating in the system to be able to leverage the trust of the government credential effectively to help remediate some of the issues. And obviously we want to get it to a point where we're understanding how it works as a product for the agency, and as well as for the Australian, including incorporating policies considerations that we are doing throughout this review. So that is the, I guess, the meat of our presentation.
I guess if there's any questions, sing out on Twitch feed or reach out to us again. Like we have, like I said, at we have a pretty cool, we have a lot of cool stuff here. Like our DevOps culture is extremely impressive. Massively cloud-based. We, go into APIs, all sorts of stuff like that. If people are more interested in other things that IP might be doing, noting we're government and we're not that interesting, I guess. But yeah, I guess for a government part, it might be a little bit interesting. So yeah.
Go back to you guys.
Alrighty. So thank you guys for that presentation. Hopefully that was interesting for the audience there. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to jump in on the chat there, drop them on. We'll keep an eye on the chat over the next little while, so feel free to have a bit of a conversation and we'll interact there as well. Thank you again, Cam and Rob, for taking the time to take us through that smart trademark system. And again, we'll be back next month. Hopefully I'll remember to turn the mic on at the start of the session next month. It's going to be fine. And with more AWS goodness from the nation's capital. But for now, thank you for spending your time with us. Have a good night, everyone. We'll catch you next time.